That's better. Welcome aboard. It's Saturday the 12th of June 2021. My name is Chris Lewis and I push pixels. Thank you for joining me. So what are we doing today? Well, first off, I'd like to apologize for the jet wash that is blowing through my room due to poor planning on my part. So hopefully you can ignore it. I'm going to try. Last week we finished up the Eagle aircraft rework of a Tom Buttery design. This week I'm doing something a little less combat oriented, engineering vehicles. Now I had done a series of engineering vehicles for the last Kickstarter, but we didn't quite get that far, so they've just been sitting and mostly languishing. Originally they were supposed to be done in the hard plastic. But they didn't come through the Kickstarter, so we thought of doing them in resin, doing a limited run like the aircraft, and then converted them again to a hybrid of resin and metal, some parts cast in metal and some parts cast in resin, and just never picked it up. But now that John has the machine in shop, we're turning our eye back towards the engineering vehicles. So I'm going to be reworking them to hopefully work in the dual cast material. Alright, so it doesn't sound too bad, Ilmarin? Ilmarin? Is that right? Ilmarin. Ah. Alright, let's see what we're looking at. Ilmarin. That's just really hard to get through my lips there for some reason. So many consonants. Alright, so this is the base design that I had come up with, and I wanted it to be modular, so it would represent a variety of vehicles. With mostly just to save on material and casting and such, but since we're doing it in-house and it's in dual cast, we're probably just going to do individual vehicles whole instead of making them modular, because these little parts, they are quite small. Lil Marianne, really? They're adding a whole lot of vowels in there to get that. Jeez. Alright, so this would be a trailer box version, carrying lots of supply and still with the yoke for the trailer hitch. And then here's the recovery box, which gets the stinger added to it for loading up. Oops. Loading up and dragging vehicles. And in the middle of that one would be a knuckle crane, so I can load and unload cargo. Is the trailer going to be slotted to hold the shipping containers? The original one I designed holds 2 of the short ones or 1 of the long ones, and I really want to be able to make those fit, even though those are cast in a different material. So hopefully we're going to be able to nail that, and the dual cast will work with the regular gray material. So yes, that was one of the things we decided early on, was we wanted to be able to make a shipping container trailer. I'm not exactly sure what those are called, whether they're naked trailers or bare trailers or rails or spikes or something. So anyway, so this is the second configuration. And then there's not that, the carryall with a boom crane. So this one just had to be able to fit a cab on the back of it, had to be so wide. Had to add a lot of extra tire in there. Added some hydraulic pads that'll extend and drop to stabilize and such. Your tie-down system and rollers and such on the back to help ease the process. So you get your little winch detail. And a boom crane to help with that salvage. And of course this is the one that's designed to use the trailer box. So there's the second configuration. And the last one is, this is the bear trailer, or whatever you would call it, that would either hold one of the long containers or two of the short containers. Which I don't have representations of in this file, so just have to use your imagination a little bit. Cabs are like 120 pounds, right? They ranged. We really got away from the designating weights because weight really had very little to do with how tough these things are. I mean, there's a volume to them. There's how densely packed they are. So we wanted to get away from that and just go with more of a description of how tough they are as a combat vessel. But John would have a better idea of how much of these things would normally weigh. It's just, I know I've had the conversation with him, but I've really forgotten where those numbers would have landed, and I don't want to give you bad information. But 120 tons does sound like a lot. So a few little issues is, one of them is the wheels. I put a lot of details on these that just really aren't going to show up enough to catch a paintbrush well enough. The little lugs in the tires. See how many lugs did I stuff in there? 10 lugs, which is pretty standard, I think. But they're just so tiny. If your monitor was the same size as mine, this would be actual size, and I can see them, but they're just tiny. They're just little things. They don't print well. They don't reproduce well. They kind of blend into the center hub a little bit. And it's just, I'm either going to have to make them larger or just get rid of them. The treads, I kind of like these general old army looking tread pattern, but I don't think they're quite distinct enough, a little too be wholly reliable, so I'll probably need to bump those up a little bit. Maybe make them taper, or give them a chamfer along the edges so they just go in and out of the mold a little easier, or are easier to do the initial print. And then there's the question of, will the tires be separate and just slapped on, or would it all get printed as one solid piece? I think they could go either way, but if they're one solid piece, there's a lot of infill I would have to do. I mean, these front ones are pretty much almost perfectly good. There's little areas on the sides of this little cargo box that I'd have to fill in there. And I'd fill in the areas underneath here The undercarriage really doesn't matter that much. But these back tires, there's a lot of infill I'd have to do to get those to work. I suppose I've infilled a lot of it already. Still, I'd be nervous about that thin little slot in there. And then, of course, there's going over it, making sure that all the details are deep enough, panels pop out enough. And really need to scrutinize this to make sure that it works with the actual real-world trailers, not just the digital ones that are on my computer. Well, hey there, Rainbow Sculptor. Thank you for joining us. I'm just going over this engineering vehicle and trying to map out the issues I will have to address in order to get it to reproduce and come out of the mold without tearing it. This would be 10mm scale. So this, the main tractor here, let's see, how long was that? It's like a little over 55¼ long. So, hair over 2 inches. So these are tiny little things. And of course these aren't combat vehicles, so they're a little less illustrious on the battlefield, although I do think they have their place. Certainly for scenario-driven campaigns where you have an objective that might involve these, go grab this or that, or used as resupply vehicles to resupply all those ones that are out of ammunition. But unarmed entirely. I suppose you could always make a design that's armed, but where's the fun in that? All right. These tires are actually made up of a lot of little pieces. So how are you handling casting for wheels that need to be parallel? Well, that's one of the things that I'm going over. It's unclear as to whether these wheels are going to be separate pieces that are glued in, or if it's all going to be cast in one piece. And there's obviously a pretty big departure in approaches for each of these cases. If they're all one piece, then I'm going to have to really go in and make sure that things are backfilled so that there's no channels going deep into it or going in and expanding to making mechanical locks in the mold. That'll just destroy a mold. If they're separate, that's a lot easier all the way around. Design-wise anyway. Having more parts, of course, adds cost to the end product. But if they're separate, then the entire wheel can be more complete. And then it's just a matter of having them, a shaft connect them, and then carving out the space underneath that they would just go up into. I mean, it's just like having these rear axles. This whole thing would be one piece going through there, and there would just be a channel that they would nestle up into and lock into place. A couple of dabs of glue and they're done. But Yeah. When you're talking about the parallel pieces, you've got these two deep channels, and as you remove it from the mold, because it's a flexible mold, it can handle this better. If this was a hard mold, there'd want to be a little bit of a camber in there to help release the object. Yeah, they're not they're not combat vehicles until you slap into external APC DCM rigs on them. Yeah, you can definitely make them higher priority targets on the battlefield. So you can theoretically just mold one tire and then run the mold a bunch of more times. Yes, you could, but when you have one mold servicing many pieces, so this thing's got 8 wheels on it. Not going to count the spare one because that's going to be molded into it. So if you had, yeah, it's all the same wheel, they're all identical. So you could just have one of those as a molded part and then cast it 10 times or 8 times. So then you've got one mold that has the chassis on it, which you rolled once, and then you have to run the other one 8 times. And it's a production issue, and that adds a lot of time and cost into the actual end product. It's actually cheaper to have all the tires and everything that's on that one piece on one mold. So that mold goes in, it's one shot, you've got one product there, or however many you can stick on a mold. It's less time changing molds. It's less time pulling molds. And your part cost goes down when you can keep everything that's necessary on one mold. When in the older days of metal, because of the idiosyncrasies of metal casting, if you wanted a higher percentage of your pieces to hit inside a mold, so you would have a an old BattleTech Mini that was 4 pieces. You would want to in metal mold casting and spin casting, you would want to have each of those pieces on a separate mold, and you would have as many of them as you could. You'd like those to be the same number. And the reason they did that is because when you have a bunch of different parts going around it, you get a higher percentage of bad hits. So a higher percentage of those figures coming out of that mold are bad, and you have to take time to actually figure out which ones are which. So they would do them as a single piece, 6, 8, 10 of them on a single mold, but you would have a separate mold for each part of that model. With this, it's much more reliable. So the thought is the exact opposite. You want everything that you need to go into that one package on as few molds as possible. So you hit it, you take it out, goes into the package, you're on your way. But because we're not hand sculpting these, we get the benefit of only having to sculpt one of the tires and then copy them and stick them wherever they need to go. So, at least on my end, it's still nice and simple. And I'm sure the hand sculpting aspect of it played a part into it too, because I know that a lot of the times sculptors would send in parts of a model. Like if they were doing a series, here's a bunch of skeletal warriors, they would send in swords and shields and stuff that are going to be repeated over a lot of them figures, and those would be cast in metal, and then they'd send those back to the modeler so he could use them across the entire line instead of having to sculpt that same sword 4 or 5 times and that same shield. At least nice companies like Reaper do that. I'm not sure about everybody, but I think that's originally how Reaper got its bits bags, is casting swords and shields and stuff for their sculptors. But I ain't one to gossip, so you didn't hear that from me. Alright. Let's tear it down to just one tire. Each one of those treads is a separate part. Yeah, I'm a glutton. And the next thing I'll do to make life a little bit easier is I will send this to the center of the world so I can more easily use symmetry. And in particular for this one, radial symmetry. I should get it out of that subfolder. Okay, so here are my basic components of a tire. I have the tire with the rim already built into it. So when it's subdivided, it looks like that. Got some creases assigned to these parts. And then I've got this center hub. Which I could have made part of the regular part, but I don't know why I didn't. Then all the tread. So much tread. And then this little piece is just a fill for the back area because spots where you get mold problems. Problems in your mold. It's not necessarily mold problems. Those parts aren't centered. Just center those. Oops. That's fine. That center hub is not lined up. And that one's fine. I'd like to still have the 10 lugs in here. These 8 lugs just seems a little too civilian. I'm going to increase the size of that hub. Make those lugs significantly larger. There we go. I just lost my scale. Yep. I think I said it was 55¼ millimeter long. That temporary save. My scale factor down. 14.95701. There we go. That looks better. Looking like I got 16 of these little knobs around the tire. That's about right. Get those to bump up a little bit more. Well, when your rig is that big, you certainly don't want it to get stuck. When your engineering vehicle gets stuck, there's a problem. Alright, got more tread showing. Now I'm gonna see if I can't chamfer the edges of these knobbies so that when it comes to making the master print of these, it comes out nice and clean, fewer supports, easier to deal with. First, I gotta isolate just the caps. There we go. That's better. Set an edge down where the tire meets it, and then remove this outer one. And thus chamfered. This look like tires for ice roads. These outside ones, since they wrap around the tire, I think they're going to be a little more difficult. This works. Well, doesn't look too bad. There we establish some creasing. Not too shabby. The spacing between these treads seems a bit extreme. Doing these kinds of modifications in radial symmetry can be a little tricky. There we go. I think that looks a little more reasonable for a tire. Tire back together. It's like a little more height was added to the tire, of course, but not too bad. Oh, I forgot one. Got the spare. See if we can get a good comparison here. So that's the old tires, new tires. Old new. Definitely added some more meat to it. That was weird. Did I forget to show the plow? There he is with his plow. And that road needs to be cleared. There's our old tires. Alright, so that's all the wheels replaced. Take a close look at this boom crane here. I would think this would have to be cast on its side, with the mold line going right through the center, right along this center line. And in that orientation, I don't see anything that's really going to grab. I don't think that's too deep. So it's less than 15 millimeters across. I'd hate to have to separate the crane from the cab and such. Make a very messy joint. So I guess I'll be leaving that one alone for now. How about I import the trailer's cargo containers? Yeah, this looks like the right file. There's our short and our long containers. Import those into here. So we have our 40-foot and our 20-foot. Okay, so that's how they're supposed to fit. These little portions are probably a little too wide, as there was likely shrinkage when the container hit final product. So they'd probably be binding on those shoulders there. So I should probably bring those in a tad. But other than that, looks like everything has a good amount of clearance. Oh, no. Another spot there, I'm going to have to bring it in. Fits, but I think it's just too close. A double. This middle piece really isn't obstructing anything. Looks like I designed it more just for it to sit on top of rather than to lock into. You can see it's even colliding in there. Give that a nice bit of clearance. So now they should be able to sit on top without any problems. They are not going to be very stable. Unless I put something on top of the trailer that goes up in there and really holds the insides of these hollow boxes, it's not going to be stable. And if I do put large keying blocks on top of there, it's not going to look good without the trailers on them. So there's a little trade-off going on there. So I'm going to err on the side of what looks good with boxes on top of them. And we'll just have to deal with the annoyance of them falling off if we don't secure them or glue them. Knuckle crane. Pocket brains of odd little structures. This mold line will have to come from the sides, and it'll likely jog along this line there. So I see a, oops. See a little area back up in there that I probably should fill in. There's a hole that goes all the way through there that I'll have to fill in. There's another hollow I'll need to fill in. So yeah, I left a lot of problems in this one. What is going on here? It's like part of the model exploded. That is very odd. This little shape here, this is what we would call non-manifold geometry. This is something that cannot exist in nature. And therefore, it cannot exist in my model. Yeah, it's a very, very odd manifestation of electrical problem there. Weird, it moved too. Very strange. Ought to be good enough. Here's an odd gathering of words. Ilmarin, do you know a good knucklehead technician? Alright, one of my backup batteries just screamed at me. I'm gonna have to take a look to see if my stream's about to end. Hold on a second. All right, sorry about that. I don't know exactly what happened, but nothing seems to be wrong. All right, it's 2 down, 1 to go. Found another one. There we go. Should probably fill in between these fingers. It's not incredibly wide. 2.26 millimeters, but it is very thin and parallel. And that could create friction and start to wear out a mold. I think our knucklehead crane's done. And here's our stinger. I think the mold parts are obvious for this one, and I really don't see anything that's going to interfere. Assuming that this is kept as a separate piece. Plow, on the other hand, I really don't see a good way of attaching this that doesn't leave a lot of really delicate parts that might not cast well. So I'll probably either wind up redesigning how this joints together, or this will be cast as part of the chassis, whichever one it happens to go on, to make a third and or fourth variant, I suppose. So I'll definitely need to talk to John about that. But while I'm looking at it, I just noticed a problem. I got a hole going all the way through my grill. Can't have a hole going through my grill. There as well. It goes through the doors. Very sloppy of me, I must say. Move it up a bump, see what happens. I fixed most of it, but we lost detail on the hatch. There we go. Got this little fill piece here. Should probably shorten up. Because I tapered all these little knobbies, I think they'll pull out of the mold just fine. So I don't need as much backfill in there. Although that area will have to be filled. pull it after there to relieve some of the issues that might happen in a crevice like that. Do it. Plug it underneath like the cheetah dish, yeah. That's the idea. Then I'd have to lower this entire apparatus. Bring the plow down. Which might be the compromise solution, but I don't think it looks nearly as good. Or maybe add some sort of detail down to the bottom that this part can plug in more directly. So I eliminate the thinness in this area here. I don't know. Gonna have to sleep on that. Talk it over with John, see what he has to say. Anyway. So the recovery box. You see the recovery box has this spot for the stinger to connect to. And I could design it that the stinger is permanently there, but it'd have to be awful lot of backfilling. Let's get that stinger up here, see what it looks like. Yeah, I'd have to fill in all of that. I think the stinger is good enough. Large enough and thick enough to be its own part. It's still got a lot of meat to it. I really wanted to make it kind of so you could plug it into the back and it's riding in the up position, or you could take it out and plug it in the bottom so it would be deployed, and then you could take another vehicle and park it on its front wheels. But that obviously didn't happen. Be an easy enough mod, but there's no way it would stay plugged in on the bottom there. That a really healthy friction fit, and then try and have something hang off of it and stay there. But anyway, I don't really see any issues with the recovery box. The knuckle crane will definitely have to be a separate part, so I'll be leaving that post in there. And then the trailer box. Now, if this were to be cast in one piece, I'd be troubled by the treads on the lower part here, pulling out of that deep cavity. So I'd want to fill in the back pretty much the same as I filled in the front, all the way back to the trailer box. So as soon as I have that discussion with John about how these things are going to be packaged and presented, we'll determine how many pieces they will be. So as far as engineering vehicles go, if anybody has an opinion on what would warrant a variant of a basically a support piece, a non-combat piece. Such a wide vehicle, the trailer looks a little bit odd, sitting up there all narrow. But that was kind of a trade-off. I designed this based off of an engineering vehicle. I can't remember whose, but I copied the dimensions from it, and that's just how wide they make them. But as you see with the carryall, because of how wide cabs are, it just wasn't wide enough. So I think I've addressed all the issues I can without knowing the answers to specific production questions, mainly what's going to be a separate part and what's going to be molded as one piece. So there's not a whole lot more I can do with this. Autosave. Does anybody have any questions? That a little too large? All right, there we have it, and a little video that I can send to John to get his notes. And I really can't think of anything I can add. So even though I'm about a half an hour early, I think I'm going to call it an early day. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you again next week. I am Chris Lewis, and I push pixels, and I hope you have a great weekend.